We're here with Sebastien Borget, the COO at Sandbox, who have been crushing it for many years and have been really leading many of the forward advances for Web3 gaming and gaming broadly speaking. So it's cool to have you here, man.
Thank you so much for having me here, yes.
Nice. So I wanted to ask you first, where did the idea come from to create the Sandbox?
Well, I think as far as I remember, as soon as I got my first video game console, the Super Nintendo and Super Mario World, it triggered with me the idea one day I want to make my own video games. Around 2010, 2011, smartphone came out, and finally this dream of making video games from your garage was made possible again. So at that point of time, I say, all right, let's jump in. And we, together with my co-founder, Arthur Madrid, we had 2 successful exits of our previous startups. And we founded that third startup, a mobile game studio working with free-to-play games with IPs. Sandbox came out as a game on smartphone where you can just create your own game by touching the screen. It really felt like magic, pixels dropping, and you could put your world or create games by adding characters, enemies, and so on, and share those creations to an online gallery for other players to enjoy. And it came as the idea making my own video game studio wasn't sufficient. I wanted really anyone to be able to make their game. So how do you allow them without any single line of code, very intuitively, and that feeling, just magical touch, came out as a solution. There was still something that we were kind of unhappy with. Basically, the top creators, they were leaving the game after a few months, after a few years. And the reason why is social fame, that recognition by featuring them, that wasn't sufficient. They wanted more, and they wanted to earn a form of revenue, a financial recognition for their contribution. And we couldn't share with them any revenue. On the App Store, the Google Play Store, you cannot send a payment to another player. You have to do manual contract, etc. Until we found in 2017, exploring a new technology emerging, blockchain. And I found the first game there called CryptoKitties. 3 things really capture our attention at that moment. The first thing is basically those virtual cats, you bought them not from the developer, but from other players. The second thing was you didn't buy them in the game itself, you bought them on an external website called OpenSea, a sort of eBay of digital asset. And the third thing is you didn't pay with a credit card in USD or Euro, you paid with a cryptocurrency called ETH. And those 3 things, when we put them together, say, wait, that might be the solution we need for our creators. Basically, instead of applying that to Virtual Cat, why don't we apply it to any content made by our creator? And that's the moment we realized that technology, blockchain and NFTs could be used to solve the problem we had. And we rebuilt Sandbox from scratch. It came with a creation tool, a game maker, a 3D editor, a marketplace, a map, a game client. And 4 years later, that's where we are with Sandbox.
Nice.
So for you, what inspired you to make today? Where your inspiration is bringing a lot of value for players? What's unique about it?
I'm just obsessed with the emergence of virtual worlds, how they came to pass and what they might look like in the future. I'm particularly obsessed also with how specific technologies could impact the future of virtual worlds. And the 2 that I would say, probably most passionate about are blockchain and AI, because I think that the opportunity for them to totally change how we deal with virtual worlds is significant, very significant. So today was born from that fascination, ultimately, to see how we could take those technologies and imbue the kind of virtual worlds that we're interested in with those technologies, and then to empower players to be able to participate in these digital spaces. We think that more people are moving into virtual worlds, so they're quickly becoming places where people hang and socialize as much as play. And I think that is not going to be a trend that slows down. And today is a place where it's quite positive, right? The mechanics are based around nurturing and growth and creativity, building and stuff like that. And we think that there are a lot of people out there who want this type of an experience and this type of a feeling. And we want to create a large virtual world for them to inhabit and hang out with their friends. Actually, and let me throw that back to you. So AI is obviously hotly discussed inside of all aspects of games. In crypto games or Web3 games, or broadly speaking in the blockchain industry, AI has been a hotly discussed topic as well, and big narrative in this cycle. What's your take on AI in games?
Well, I think like AI in games can really be a very interesting technology and tool that supplement many areas. The first one is like, and we're using that already for over a year at Sandbox, is for like reduction of like toxicity and moderation of content and in-game conversation. So that's the first thing. I think it also helps like creativity along the way. It helps ideate much faster. With a few prompts, you can already generate the idea of the land or template for a land. So, but it used to take a few days to just prototype and make a concept can be done in a minute. We've seen AI for like music and sound generation, adding a bit of immersion. We're using AI for capturing body movement as well, so real human body movement. So people can animate with their emotes, those avatars, and their movement is much more realistic.
It's getting amazing.
Because it's taken from real humans. And those real humans actually get proper credit and monetization for the movement they create as well. So it's very important that the technology support always the creator, doesn't take away from them.
I mean, obviously AI bots are kind of like, there's a huge challenge there for lots of games, right? Aim bots and sort of first person shooters and stuff like that. But AI botting is a big thing. But for me, what I'm really interested in is AI NPCs, right? I love the idea that
I was going there, yeah.
Oh, right. So
Right.
For me, I'm really passionate about how we can build emotional connections between ourselves and AI NPCs. So is that something that you see in the medium term or long term vision for Sandbox?
When you start having conversation and you cannot distinguish anymore if it's with a human or an AI, you still spend time with it and you feel like those worlds are more lively. In all those RPG, you talk and you talk again and they just have one prompt and the same in the loop, right? Like, so now maybe they can have that prompt and a few other funny jokes and so on, which make it enjoyable to converse with them.
Just so you know, we've built our own AI character engine in order to be able to build out today. And we envision bringing that to more developers and giving people the opportunity to have flexible, intelligent characters deployed into their virtual worlds.
I think it's really an innovation and an experimentation. So I cannot wait to see it implemented at scale into like a virtual world that's going to become big enough. So there's still a good balance between humans and AI agents. And let's see how it goes. So maybe we'll see by playing today how it goes and it inspired to implement it in Sandbox. Maybe GTA 6 will be the one that benefited the most and will be the massive like MMO that like really turns us all into this vision and say, wow, like, that's the future of gaming.
Okay, cool. So tell me, okay, there's so many different things that we can spin into from that. I mean, one of the things that I found really interesting at the beginning was that you was the kind of opening of the opportunity to make games, you know? I think around 2010 you mentioned. How do you think that's moved over the last while for game developers, let's say, and then we can move into some other areas. But since the emergence of things like Unity and Unreal Engine, it's made it a lot more accessible for people to be able to express themselves using interactive technologies, right? So talk me through a little bit about how you've seen that kind of evolution as someone who is indeed presumably building inside of one of those game engines, but also Sandbox also has a kind of a game engine inbuilt into it as an experience as well. So I think that you come from it kind of from both sides. So I'd love to hear about that.
The way we look at it is basically, for me, the future of gaming is all about user-generated content. We've seen games like GTA 5 and so on, like once you add modding on top of it, or Counter-Strike, or etc., it can keep evolving for decades. That tendency is going to accelerate. In the future, I don't see any top 10 title that doesn't have a massive UGC component baked in. And that's why I think it's so important to focus on like how accessible those content creation tools, the tools that allow people to make their own level and character are. Unity has done an amazing job as like democratizing game development, but you still need to learn a programming language, you still need to follow a certain course, academy, or go to a school of video gaming. With Sandbox, we onboard massively first-time creators, people who never made video games, not even from an engineering background, actually. And that, for me, is essential because it brings more creativity, new creativity in the space. There's been one thing, in my opinion, that in the mobile and free-to-play game industry that happened for the past 15 years is like the creativity in those games has been less and less because we have been only going through the same iteration model of like what's a top grossing successful game on the monetization side can be. Whereas when you bring new content creator, when you invent new gameplays, finally that new things can emerge. Not all of them might be successful, but at least there's a platform that taking risk, that proposing fun stuff. And that's very beautiful to observe, that's fun to explore and play.
Nice, that's cool. It's really interesting to hear you talk about how you can bring more creators into the creative process of making games. That's something I'm really passionate about as well. Broadly speaking, I've had the opportunity to work on a lot of really innovative, cool games. And sometimes that innovation has taken place in different parts of the studio, right? So like sometimes the innovation, which is kind of a big part of what we saw with the emergence of free to play, a big part of the innovation there may not have been on the kind of fundamental game design, but it was on the business models and the monetization strategies, right? Which totally created a whole new framework for how we see video games when merged with the emergence of mobile phones, right? It totally changed video games. One of the things that enables these new genres sometimes, or these new play patterns, right, is the technology that underpins it, you know? So when we talk about innovation in that way, you also pointed out a moment ago that something that captured your attention early in the process of Sandbox was blockchain, right? Where do you think blockchain fits into those? Where can it innovate on business models, and where can it innovate when it comes to game design?
I think it can fit both sides of the spectrum actually, and it can provide like a new way to design game and align the value across like all the actors involved in the value chain creation, including the game developer, the platform, the players, the creator, and so on. Right now, most of the game are actually monetizing through live ops. So basically they launch, and then regularly on a monthly or quarterly basis, they have an update that could be seasonal, where they introduce new content, battle pass, and rewards. There is an issue which is like the content treadmill. Like basically the whole monetization is like only launching new content, and like once it's done, it expires, it's consumable in a way, and like you need to buy again to reset every player's progression at the same level and so on. With blockchain, you can like really shift that and think to optimize, like why don't we try to maximize not just the amount of content we want to sell once, but more to maximize the exchange of the content, the same content between users. So basically, in your live ops design, you can say like, well, every season I change the characteristics so that certain digital asset, game equipment, so that become more or less interesting and attractive for players based on like, I don't know, the gameplay of that season. And the players who own those the month before had no value or lesser value, they might want to exchange, selling to each other. And you as a game developer, you could earn a transaction fee of usually 5-10% of the value of the asset that player exchange among each other on the marketplace. So you don't oversupply constantly new content, which can reduce your production cost in terms of art and design and graphic, while you can be more creative by also leveraging the in-game economy and the activity of players through that game design.
Can I jump in on that one? And how do you think that then feeds on from the player's perspective? So that kind of, this empowerment that you provide to players to kind of optimize the ability for them to trade on secondary markets and peer-to-peer. What does that do you think, for players from a gameplay perspective or from a psychological perspective?
Well, I do think it contributes to a few things. One is like, I do see basically gamers are like great, like people think like when you play video game, you don't really gain a lot of skills for the real life. On the opposite, actually, I think like gamers are probably the best people who are going to like take a lot of parameters into consideration and make the most optimal choice on their decision on what to buy based on like what the quest, the mission, the requirement of their nests, and so on. So those are very concrete skills that can be valued, like to optimize your outcome, to spend the least for the maximum results, and so on. So that can help an economy. Like actually, because most of the games, they are designed by economy designers. Economy designers tend to be like the master of the whole rules, of the whole gameplay. They set the rules and nobody else can impact those. But with blockchain, we can start to decentralize the economy as well, where like the player can take a more proactive role in defining what they consider is valuable, is rare, and also influence the decision toward like the next season or updates of the game as well. So that's one point leading to as well. On the other side, from like the player perspective, like the fact that you have either NFTs or a token that manage the economy of a game, provide to the player not only the true digital ownership of those assets, they can have the power, the freedom to resell them if they want when they quit the game, etc. But they provide them as well a stake in the success of the game, because like basically by owning asset of a game that you play the most, etc., you want that game to be successful. So you have an interest in a way to attract new players, to talk about it, to become an ambassador for it. And with the decentralization and with the governance, like in Sandbox, with the DAO, so I didn't explain too much, but in a DAO, basically...
Yeah, now's an opportune time, because I'd love to hear about what you've set up there.
A DAO stands for Decentralized Autonomous Organization. It's a place, it's a forum where anyone can submit a proposal or can vote on other players' proposal. And how do they vote? They essentially vote using their Sand token and their land. So meaning like by owning the token from the economy of the game, or by owning assets of the Sandbox platform, the land where the games are being published, they can express their vote and they can decide like the priorities for the development of a roadmap, the reward that can be distributed, the gameplay for the next season. All of those decisions that were centralized on our team before now become decentralized, and they have a real say. The game by itself could exist in the future without us being in charge or running it, and like maybe in a timeless manner. I was referring before, we want games that can live on with UGC for 10 years, 20 years, forever. I believe Sandbox can be that kind of platform that can live on forever, and decentralization will be an essential part of it. But it doesn't come from nowhere. That's why I still think like a progressive decentralization is important to inspire, to show like what Sandbox stands for, what the tool and the technology has enabled us to build, and where it can go. Maybe they will become very politicized. There will be people representing different parties, creating their own nation, their own rules, and so on. They're kind of excited to see how it can evolve.
That's super cool. That's super. I really like as well the idea of this of progressive decentralization. It feels like there's often a challenge when you're dealing with very experimental, emergent technology, and also trying to create a really compelling video game. And you have to kind of sometimes make a little bit of trade-offs on these things. But the idea of progressive decentralization, the way I understand you're talking about it, is, well, make a really cool experience, decentralize as much as you can at the time that doesn't compromise on that product phase. So you're able to bring the users in, so you're able to create the cool stuff that they actually want. And over time, as the technology develops out, that you can actually continuously move towards a more decentralized infrastructure. And that itself becomes fascinating, as you say, because it becomes, you're kind of, as a developer, you start handing away the keys to the kingdom a little bit, right?
You know that's something that most of the developers kind of are afraid of. You know, they've been grown and accustomed to, like, we're our own dictator, we set all our rules, nobody will never be challenged. Like, community can say they like or they don't like, but it's still us that set the rules. I see, you use the right word, like it's very experimental. Like we're in a phase again, like developers are open to the idea of like, let's experiment with gameplay. They don't know yet what would be the ultimate successful model. A lot of games that now have a utility token, a cryptocurrency attached to it, they, instead of selling, like spend that token to buy an item, they ask the player to stake. The difference is basically you lock that token in a smart contract, almost like you deposit on a bank account. You cannot use it anymore, so it's reducing the circulating supply of the token on the economy. It generates a yield, and if you stake it for long enough, you get rewards like access to special game item and so on. So now it's teaching a new game financial mechanics to players. It's teaching them like how to save your hard-earned money and receive a yield, which I love, because then once again, video game is teaching like very complex financial concept to the youngest audiences to prepare them to their next job and the real world. Yes. I've seen as well, like once you start to own certain NFTs, it gives you access only to portion of the gameplay or access to more rewards versus regular players. So it's a form of free-to-play where like the digital asset you own give you various level of benefit, whether it gives you a whitelist access to mint the next drop of asset, it gives you access to special experiences and events in the game that give you certain form of reward. Most of the developers in Web3, they are thinking on that new strategy. Like if I can offer through, so it's called interoperability. If you own a land in Sandbox, you get access to a certain progression level, certain statues, certain rewards in my game. It drives automatically users, and it's in a way like it's a law. And those users that they attract, actually, they are not competing with two games, actually, because the value, their time, their digital wealth on their wallet isn't lost when they move from one game to another. It actually builds up. Another exciting model I find in Web3, where we are all growing by network effect. One game can help another game to grow the value of the player's pool. And from there, like synergies and collaboration becomes a new way to go. So let's share a maximum of knowledge, of things we found. So we learn fast, we iterate fast, and we can benefit from those.
The interoperable metaverses, we're definitely going to dive into that in a moment. Before we do, something just jumped into my mind that which is relevant to all this, and also relevant just to pull it back to some of the stuff with Sandbox DAO. Is that where you want to take it? Like where you initially, maybe some aspects of the Sandbox was decentralized. Are you moving to a point where ultimately you, as the leader, are trying to actually ultimately hand away the keys to the kingdom, so you can set up governance structures and you can essentially be part of that governance structure, but rather than the main centralized actor in it?
Exactly what we just started 2 days ago. So yes,
this is the beginning of basically this process.
The first phase of the DAO of Sandbox is basically like introducing the possibility for players and creators to vote on certain number of SIPs, Sandbox Improvement Proposals, that we submit and curate by a council. Right now, the first 3 SIPs is about the constitution, the budget, and the council. So they have to approve the rule of set on how to manage the budget, vote, and so on. They can approve that council, and if we don't do well, like they can already say, oh, I want to vote, I want to elect, I want to propose myself as a new council member to replace X, Y, or Z, and this is why I would do better, vote for me, and so on. So they really have a say. Like technically, the community can fire me if I don't do a good job, which is amazing, right?
Nice, man. No, that's super cool, super interesting. Okay, so just to jump onto the Metaverse, okay? The Metaverse, obviously super heated term. A couple of years ago, it was the be all and end all of all technology. Obviously, Mark Zuckerberg, I think the big inside of the decentralized metaverse, there was folks like yourself really, really leading the charge. You had Decentraland also that were there. What's the Metaverse?
So the Metaverse is this concept that we are all, and we should be all, free to move our identity, our character, our wealth, etc. But it will take time to establish fully. And it's not the vision like a lot of time like media and of course Meta has depicted of like, oh, Metaverse is virtual reality headsets. It's multi-platform. It can be accessed from the web, from desktop, from PC, from Mac, from mobile, from AR, from VR. At the end, it doesn't really matter how it's like being represented. It can be 3D, but it doesn't need to be. It can also be a 2D pixelated world, top-down, or other views. But it's really the idea that everything can move seamlessly. For the first time, that's really Metaverse to me.
Why did people end up with that period, which I don't think is totally over, of kind of antithesis against the term of the Metaverse?
A lot of projects that pitched the vision of the Metaverse, they went straight into the science fiction, Ready Player One vision, which is, as you know, being in video game, very expensive, long, requires a lot of technical talent and skills. Meta, when they announced in October 2021 that we're rebranding and building Metaverse, and they showed a vision of it, and what they deliver after burning billions of dollars, is sensibly very different and not aligned with that. And they haven't stopped, they are working, but we all recognize it's going to take 10 years to achieve the vision we projected for people. And whenever I look back, a year later at what we've achieved at Sandbox, it's already night and day. Like the quality of the graphics, the experience, the loading speed, the kind of gameplay, the brands we onboarded, it's always a step up.
It's cool that you guys have, you foresee the fact that, okay, it's not just about giving them the tools, but it's also creating structures to incentivize people to learn how to make great games as well. So I really love that as a kind of a cohesive way to push forward UGC. Just before we go then, man, what's next for you guys? What's the main thing that you're really looking to do next at Sandbox?
First of all, like Sandbox is still in an alpha stage. So we keep upgrading our product and our tools over almost like every quarter. Our most immediate milestone is to launch Sandbox in beta with a few massive updates on the gameplay, the 3Cs, so what the character, the avatar can do in terms of like capabilities, jumping, flying, and so on. I don't want to tease too much, but just a few things of like that. More monetization mechanics. Then move to add mobile platform next year once we consider the product is even more mature. Keep working and involving this DAO structure to decentralize the decision and how we run and develop, what we prioritize in the development. And well, I hope that over a decade, some years might not be exciting, might be just repeat and do the same, slightly better, iterating. No groundbreaking, massive, big change, but there might be a tipping point. And that tipping point, I hope, is soon, next year, in 2 years, and then from there it will grow massively.
Nice. Brother, thank you so much. It was a really good chat.
Thank you.
Yeah, nice for popping by, man.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Cheers, brother. Nice one.